And they're being used against non-terrorists.
And they're being used. Well, of course. I mean, this is what happens, isn't it? You know, this is what happens is that once governments, once police forces, once they have these extra powers, they of course then use them in any way that they see fit. And I'm afraid that the result of this now 9-year nearly war on terror is that our loss of individual freedoms right across the Western world is simply enormous. It's as if the terrorists have won. Because our own politicians have used this as an excuse to get more power. Similarly, the same phenomenon is happening with global warming. And I mean, Al Gore, I mean, you know, God help us. I mean, here's a man who lost the presidential election, who has now gone on to make many millions himself. And this shouldn't be forgotten, you know. He's made many millions himself out of this scaremongering, frankly. Absolute scaremongering over whether CO2 emissions, as he says, are inexorably leading to temperatures going up. Now, of course, the fact that we know that temperatures have not gone up, they've actually now gone down since 1998 or 2002, depending where you set the bar, is irrelevant. But
so now they've changed it to weather changes, climate, any change is unnatural.
Well, that's right, and you know, They were hooked on global warming. They say global warming less now because it's cooling. But, you know, any time there's a hurricane, any time there's a flood, any time anything happens, we're told this is because of CO2 emissions. And we have the amazing situation with Copenhagen where, you know, we may or may not be signing up to some new ridiculous deal over the next few weeks. And, I mean, just give an example of how mad this is. We've just seen Britain's oldest steelworks up at a place called Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. That steelworks announced last week that it's closing down. In doing so, the parent company, an Indian firm called Tata, will be given £600 million worth of carbon credits, right, for closing down that plant. And then what will happen is all of that production will shift across to India, who of course have no intention of listening to any of this stuff. I mean, in the name of fighting against carbon emissions, we're actually literally exporting jobs from our country to countries like India, which clearly makes no sense at all. And we've got a situation where we're going to be signed up to treaties, which means that we can't change these agreements by how we vote at future elections. Now, the whole principle of democracy, you know, whatever level it's at.
Or sovereignty. Sovereignty. I mean, sovereignty is all about not being dominated by some foreign offshore corporation, British East India Company or empire. But a member of Parliament, a member of European Parliament, I want you to get into this key point here in just a moment. But I don't want to just run over the key fact you just laid out as we go to break here. You just pointed out, not only are they paying them hundreds of thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to shut a steel mill down in the UK and jobs. But when they go to India, there'll be zero emissions controls. So even if you believe carbon dioxide is this murderous, toxic waste chemical weapon, even if you believe that fraud and polar bears can't swim and all the rest of it and penguins are drowning, the most incredible aquatic birds there are, the ice caps are getting bigger. Even if you believe all that, this will produce more CO2 under the UN's plan, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And you know, the other big response in Europe to this is we are building tens of thousands of these ludicrous windmills, right across Europe, and we're told this is wonderful, this will be a wonderful source of renewable energy. Now, I'm not against the concept of renewable energy, but I'll tell you this. In Germany, they built 19,000 wind turbines, but not a single coal, oil, or gas-fired power station has closed down, because in the depth of winter, when a big anticyclone sits over northern Europe, not a single one of those 19,000 wind turbines moves round and produces any electricity. Even if cutting carbon emissions was vital to the environment, the way we're going about it is mad, bad, and wrong.
Well, it's absolutely. We're going to break. We'll come back and finish the point I interrupted you on. But it's not, a windmill's fine on your house because you don't have power loss down the lines. I have family that works in different power stations here in Texas. You lose tons of power downline. You have to have incredible power just to get it to places. The power's too low from windmills to let you transfer it and transport it, so you lose most of it. It's very wasteful. We'll be right back. Nigel Farage is a member of the European Union Parliament, hailing from England, and he is now running for the Parliament as well in England. And we've got him for another 35 minutes with us. We really appreciate him joining us. He's a very busy man. Okay, sir, I interrupted you when you were getting onto the point about the fact that this is dictatorial. And then I wanted to ask you, are we beginning to get headway? Are we winning? And being around these European Union members for close to a decade, I mean, they're openly on television saying dictatorial world government. What do they say behind the scenes? Go ahead, Mr. Farage.
Right. Let's just consider what the concept democracy is. Now, there's an old saying, an old Westminster saying, and I'm going back now to the English Civil War in the 17th century, right? And the whole point about electing people to our House of Commons, to our Parliament in Westminster, was that no Parliament may bind its successor, all right? Now, that may be old-fashioned English, but what it actually means is there's nothing in a proper democratic Parliament, there is nothing that one government or one Parliament does that cannot be undone by any successive government or Parliament, right? That's why we have elections, for goodness sake. Now, the whole point about European Union, for example, is we currently face a mass of regulations that are going to do severe damage to the City of London, to our financial services sector, where I spent 20 years of my working life. And once those regulations have gone through, it won't matter a damn whether David Cameron becomes the Prime Minister or Gordon Brown gets re-elected, because there's nothing we can do as voters in Britain to change those European laws. So that is an absolute, total denial of democracy.
And it turns your parliament into a vestigial, ceremonial dress of the European Union.
Yeah, the whole thing has become a complete charade, because 75% of our laws are made somewhere else, and that's before they got this new European Constitutional Treaty passed, and now we're told that even in areas like foreign policy, we can't do our own thing, we'll have to do it at a European level. So it is literally, being part of a European Union, this European Union, is the death of democracy. I believe the very same principles apply to these agreements that started back at the time of Kyoto and could be coming out of Copenhagen over the next period of time. Because if we sign up to a series, if Obama signs up and if Britain signs up to a whole set of targets 20, 30 years hence from now, then by definition, you've broken that principle of no parliament may bind its successor. Now, of course, we're always told that, we have to operate together, we have to operate at a European level or a global level to deal with the CO2 crisis or the war on terror or whatever else it may be, but that is a complete denial of democracy. And I've been fighting and making these points, and during the last few years, we've had the French in a referendum say no, we've had the Dutch in a referendum say no, we've had the Irish in a referendum say no. The British, of course, who were promised referendums all the way through, have just been denied them. But as I start to make these arguments, I can see the fear in the eyes of the leaders of this European Union project. I sit on the front bench of this Parliament. I'm literally within feet of these people that are doing this to our democracy, and I can see the fear in their eyes when I make these arguments, because they know what I'm saying is right. And their response to me has been truly extraordinary. And there are clips that you could find on the EU Parliament website. I've been called mentally ill because of what I stand for, which, of course, is very reminiscent, isn't it, of what
they've said you're a naked monkey up in a tree, and then when you try to defend yourself, you're told you can't name call. So it's like some Kafka-esque Soviet apparatchik court where it's la-la land. They can call you names, but you can't have free speech. You can't criticize the EU, but they can call you a naked monkey. By the way, that clip is coming up. Stay there. Nigel Farage is our guest.